Do you know this man? What if I told you that he is a descendant of Hercules and Hylas, his grandfather on his dad's side is the ancient Greek god Zeus, and on his mom's side, also the ancient Greek god Zeus? I'm talking about Alexander the Great, son of King Philip II, the greatest conqueror of antiquity and an incredibly charming man. In this video we get to know Alexander the Great better and learn about his trek to Asia, his life story, and how Alexander the Great's campaign influenced the ancient as well as modern world. In 356 before Christ, a tragedy occurs. The temple of the goddess Artemis of Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the world, set on fire by Herostratus. The Persian magicians interpreted the fire as a bad omen for their power. On the same night, in the Macedonian capital of Pella, the son of King Philip II of Macedonia, Prince Alexander, was born. Later, the fire was found an explanation. The temple burned because the goddess at that time was not in place. She helped the boy Alexander to appear on the world. It's also worth mentioning the prince's father, King Philip II. It was he who laid the foundation for the future empire of Alexander the Great. He reformed the army, creating the well-known Macedonian phalanx, the strongest army of his time. Philip centralized the state by strengthening its power, actively developed the economy of the state through the money of gold and silver, as well as built roads and cities. Philip also united the divided Greek polities under his hegemony by creating Corinthian Union, and thus subjugated almost the entire Peloponnesian peninsula. Alexander grew up to be a rather intelligent and inquisitive boy. For example, once in his father's absence, the prince received Persian ambassadors and asked questions that were unusual for a boy of his age, which pleasantly surprised the Persian envoys. Alexander also managed to settle the unruly host Bucephalus, who became his reliable companion in future campaigns, after which his father exclaimed, "Seek, my son, a kingdom for yourself, for Macedonia is too small for you," which is exactly what Alexander did. Alexander's teacher was a famous Greek philosopher Aristotle. Also, Alexander often disagreed with his teacher. It was Aristotle who instilled in him a love for Greek culture, which Alexander would bring to the East. Even during his father's reign, Alexander began to earn his authority in the army when in 338 before Christ he commanded the left flank of the troops at the Battle of Hyrenia and thus made a decisive contribution to the victory. Alexander himself often argued with his father, and after each of his father's victories would say, "Father will take everything, so there will be nothing left for me and you." In 336 before Christ, King Philip was assassinated and Alexander, aged 20, took the Macedonian throne. The Greek city-states quickly declared their independence, to which Alexander responded immediately by suppressing the rebellion with his army. Before returning to Macedonia, Alexander met with the philosopher Diogenes in Corinth. According to legend, the king offered Diogenes anything he wanted, but the philosopher replied, "Don't block my son." The king was so impressed by the pride and greatness of the philosopher, who treated him with such disrespect, that on his way back he said, "If I were not Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes." After dealing with the rebels in Greece, Alexander the Great marched on the Persians in the spring of 334 before Christ. The groundwork for this invasion had been laid by his father, who had been gathering an army for a campaign in the east. Alexander's army numbered 50,000 men in total. Alexander won his first victory over the Persians near the legendary city of Troy during the battle at the Granicus River. Alexander defeated the Persian army, losing only 100 men killed, compared to 10 times as many Persian casualties. This battle gave Alexander free reign, and he easily subjugated Asia Minor, capturing cities such as Sardis, Ephesus, Miletus, Halicarnassus, Gordion, where Alexander cut the Gordian knot, according to a prophecy that whoever could untie it would become king of Asia, as well as Iconium and Tarsus. Alexander then moved on to the Middle East, where in 333 before Christ the Battle of Issus took place, in which Alexander defeated the Persian king Darius III and captured his family. Darius' daughter Statira would later become one of Alexander the Great's wives. Alexander subjugated the Middle East and captured Damascus, Tyre, Sidon and Gaza. In 332 before Christ, Alexander entered Egypt and captured the Egyptian capital of Memphis, where he was proclaimed the son of God, the son of the Egyptian god Amun-Ra. This, to put it mildly, didn't sit well with his army, which was unhappy that Alexander had basically disowned his dad and started getting too close to Eastern culture. In 331 before Christ, Alexander and Darius fought a decisive battle at Gaugamela. Darius was defeated by Alexander and later killed by his own satrap, whom Alexander executed for betraying the Persian king. After Alexander's victory at Gaugamela, the Persian Empire essentially came to an end. Alexander took Babylon, Susa and Persepolis, the then capital of Persia, which was partially burned down by Alexander as an act of revenge for the Greco-Persian wars. After conquering Persia, Alexander headed even further east. He conquered the lands of modern Afghanistan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, taking cities such as Bactra, modern Balkh in Afghanistan, and Marakanda, modern Samarkand in Uzbekistan. After that, in 326 before Christ, Alexander headed for India. From the conquered lands of Afghanistan, he invaded modern-day Pakistan and northern India, after which his army refused to go any further, and he led them back across the Gedrosian desert, resulting in most of his army dying from dehydration and exhaustion. In 324 before Christ, Alexander's army returned to Babylon, which Alexander had made the new capital of his empire. In 323 before Christ, a few days before the start of a new campaign to the south to subjugate the Arabian Peninsula, Alexander died at the age of 32. Now let's talk about the legacy that Alexander the Great left us and the ancient world. Before discussing Alexander the Great's legacy, it's worth mentioning that the Greeks considered the Macedonians not only unequal to themselves, but even regarded them as barbarians. Nevertheless, this didn't prevent Alexander the Great from loving and spreading Greek culture in the conquered lands. Alexander gave rise to the Hellenistic era, which will continue for 300 years. Hellenism is a so-called symbiosis of ancient Greek and Eastern cultures such as Babylonian, Egyptian, Indian and Persian, which interacted with each other to form a unique culture in the lands conquered by Alexander the Great. Alexander founded new cities throughout his Eastern campaign, which he named in his honor. In total, he founded about 70 cities within Alexandria. One of them, Alexandria Egyptian, became the scientific center of antiquity, where was located the well-known Alexandria Library, which contained up to 700,000 scrolls. Alexander united under his hegemony half of the then known civilized world, but he didn't just conquer the eastern lands, he decided to create a superstate of East and West. He moved the capital to Babylon and began to adopt Eastern traditions, such as bowing at the feet. In 324 before Christ, in order to strengthen the course started by Alexander to unite the two worlds, he organized the so-called Wedding of Nations in the city of Susa. 10,000 Macedonian soldiers took Persian women as wives and received a marriage gift from the king. Alexander himself also married two girls, Statira, daughter of King Darius III, and Perisetida, daughter of King Artaxerxes III. However, after Alexander's death, many soldiers simply kicked out their eastern wives and they were left with nothing in a foreign land. Scientists consider Alexander the Great's empire to be one of the first examples of globalization, even if it's a bit different from how we think of globalization today, because Macedonian globalization was more about military and cultural factors than economic ones. It's also interesting to know that scientists found some Greek texts calling for the spread of Buddhism. Despite Alexander's efforts, the empire of East and West he created collapsed almost immediately after his death, as the young Alexander was able to conquer territories, but having left this world at the age of 32, didn't manage to unite and strengthen them. Nevertheless, his legacy as one of the most successful military commanders in history still finds its place in the modern world, and not only as a topic in school history lessons.